Last video for graphing trigonometric functions. So I have created the function -2 sine of 3x plus 1. And we want to identify and sketch a graph of the sine curve with all these modifications. So kind of gave you the prompt to find all these super important things like the amplitude, which is 2, not -2. It's 2 because amplitude is a distance and therefore is always positive. But what is important is that we're going to be flipped. Your period is 2 pi divided by 3. Normal period is 2 pi. That 3 makes the sine graph go 3 times faster. So it now can finish a cycle in 1/3 of the amount of time, aka 2 pi over 3. Your midline, that guy, 1. And your increment is your period divided by 4, and your period is 2 pi over 3. Dividing by 4 is the same thing as multiplying by a quarter, so I think it's actually easier to do 2 pi over 3 times a quarter, which is 2 pi over 12, or pi over 6. So we're ready to go. We've got all the important stuff all planned out. So what I would do, and what we've been doing when we graph these things, I know we've had a little hiatus, but I usually draw a dashed little line at the 1, because that's the midline. 2 higher is your max, and 2 lower is your min. And we're good to go. We've got all the important stuff ready to roll. So what's super important is, how does a sine curve look? A sine curve normally starts at the middle and goes up. So the first graph we should plot is in the middle, and then we should bounce up, down, etc. over and over and over again, except we're flipped. So it really doesn't look like that. The pattern is going to be like this. Start at the middle and going down because of the flip. The other thing is, what's our scale? And that's what basically the increment is telling us, is that every pi over 6, we're going to hit a max, a min, or a midline. So this should be pi over 6. This should be 2 pi over 6. This should be 3 pi over 6. This should be 4 pi over 6. This should be 5 pi over 6. 6 pi over 6. And then we're pretty much good to go. I know a lot of these fractions reduce. That's pi over 3. That guy's pi over 2. That guy's 2 pi over 3. That guy's actually pi. But we're pretty much ready to just follow through our pattern. So start in the middle, go down, then back to the middle, then back to the top, or all the way up to the top. That's our first top. Back to the middle, and that's a cycle. And you just need to keep going with that pattern to graph your second cycle. So it should be here, then here, then here. That would have been 7 pi over 6. And this one would have been 8 pi over 6, which would finish our second cycle. Make sure you're graphing 2 periods. But other than that, I think this looks fine. The big whopping difference, if it says cosine instead of sine, is you just start at the top, because cosine is a graph that starts at its max. So it still oscillates at the same frequency. Everything else would be the same here. We just would have started up here, then gone to the middle, then gone down to the bottom. And if it had a big old negative in front, we would have flipped it and made it start at the min. That's it. That's the whole whopping difference. So shouldn't be too hard since it has no phase shift / horizontal shift. Hopefully that one helps with those 2 graphs, 16 and 17.